Hey guys, what's up? So last time I showed you 10 JRPGs released on the PS1 that you can actually play in other consoles. But what about the games that you cannot play anywhere, absolutely anywhere except the PS1 or except in emulation? Thankfully there aren't that many, but yes, these 10 following JRPGs on the PS1, you can't play them anywhere else unless you buy a physical copy or emulation like I said. So here are 10 exclusive JRPGs on the PS1, and the best ones of course, so let's begin! Number 10. Jade Cocoon. This is a turn-based RPG with monster collecting elements. The story follows Levant living in a small village. His goal is to take on his deceased father's footsteps to become a cocoon master. Cocoons are where monsters are born from, so you can raise them and train them. Exploration will mostly take place in the large forests or jungles around the village, including several different ruins. It's your job to capture these monsters so you can use them in battle against your enemies. In fact, once you get your first minions, you'll be able to directly control their turns during combat. Mixed with traditional RPG elements, Jade Cocoon makes it up for a classic game with a lot more to offer than just a monster training game. Thanks to its obscurity and severe lack of advertisement, the game hasn't been re-released anywhere, especially not since the publisher worldwide was Crave Entertainment, a company that disappeared 10 years ago. Number 9. Brave Fencer Musashi. As a Squaresoft RPG, I'm surprised this hasn't been re-released anywhere, never. Actually, original version wasn't even released in Europe back then. This is an action RPG where you only play as Musashi, a hero summoned by a princess to save her kingdom from being invaded. His goal also includes finding the legendary sword Lumina before the enemy empire does. But it doesn't take itself seriously, and it's one of those charismatic stories full of comedy bits. The game has a clock system with both day and night times. NPCs and enemies will be different or behave differently depending on the time. Controls are kinda clunky and outdated to be honest, but if you can appreciate it for what it was back then, I think it still holds up. Despite its commercial success in Japan and its positive reception worldwide, this game still remains exclusive to the PS1, but seeing as it is a Squaresoft title, I hope it gets remastered soon. Number 8. Eternal Eyes. Eternal Eyes is a grid-based strategy RPG with some Pokemon elements. You play as a group of friends, but you can only control the main character during battle and his monsters. These monsters are actually magical puppets that you can get during battle or as you make progress, and they also evolve once they're trained properly. Depending on the jewels you collect and their color, you can get them to be more powerful. This is kind of an easy game at first, even though you can only have up to 3 puppets fighting by your side. It's pretty basic and easy to understand, and also easy to get into. It's not among the best strategy RPGs on the PS1, but it's alright. I guess since it's so obscure and it was completely ignored when it came out even in Japan, it's no surprise this game still remains an exclusive to the PS1. Number 7. Brigandine, The Legend of Ursena. This one is another strategy RPG in style of a campaign. You select between 6 different characters, each representing a kingdom or nation. The goal of the game is to conquer all territories possible, but of course each character has different objectives, which also lead to different endings. You will be in charge of several platoons under several commanders, mostly controlling monsters. Once you decide which fort or castle you want to attack, a long battle will then start. It's played on hexagonal grids and you can only win once you defeat the enemy commander. Sometimes you'll fight against several platoons and so on. Depending on the character you choose at the beginning, the game can be either easy or hard. I found some routes to be harder than others. Brigandine is kind of complicated and hard to get into, but once you do, it delivers quite an original adventure. Don't be afraid to try this one out if you want a different strategy RPG. Number 6. Kudelka. Well, here is Kudelka, one of the most interesting RPGs on the PS1. It was intended to be a mix of survival horror with a turn-based RPG. It did not succeed, however, and ended up being quite a troublesome video game. Some things here are fantastic though, so despite its slow-paced gameplay, it's still worth checking out. Developed by Hiroki Kikuta, who used to work for Squaresoft, and several other ex-employees. It had a very tense and difficult development, so maybe that's why some things ended up being worse than others. You control Kudelka, of course, a psychic visiting Wales to explore a cursed monastery. There she encounters two more characters that seem to be trapped, but with a hidden agenda, of course. The game has tank controls that work just fine like any other tank controls of its time. Unfortunately, developers decided to go for random encounters and really slow battles. They couldn't decide at the end if they wanted simple turn-based, so for whatever reason they opted for a grid-based system. Kudelka had great ideas that could have been executed much better with the right budget, decisions and technology. It was supposed to be a huge deal in Japan, but it just failed to deliver a wholesome adventure. Like I said, it's worth checking out, especially since it led to the popular Shadow Hearts series a few years later. Number 5. Vandal Hearts II. This game is yet another RPG that also had a lot of potential, but with developers wanting to try creating a different battle formula, not always does it end well. What's interesting about this game is that despite not being related to its predecessor, it's one of those games with branching paths. It has two arcs, with your characters as kids and then as adults. The decisions you make during both lead to multiple endings. Problem is, the gameplay itself was unique. It's still a strategy RPG played on grid maps, but the twist here is that when your character moves, the enemy moves as well at the same time. This makes it so hard to plan your strategies accordingly, and eventually you end up relying on luck, praying that the enemy doesn't make a move that can leave you exposed or pretty much ruined. Sometimes it's fun to play, and it is very interesting as it is challenging, but it's not something I got used to when I first played it. I still recommend it though if you're looking for something rather strange. Konami didn't want to re-release it anywhere though, and I'm thinking it's because most fans of the original didn't like it. Number 4. Dragon Valor. An action RPG also with branching paths and endings. You play the story through the eyes of 2 or possibly 3 different characters depending on your choices. Who you marry your first character to determines who your kid will be in the next chapter. All 3 characters control very similarly, using a magic sword as they cut through enemies. Bosses are epic here, whether they're giant dragons or regular enemies. It doesn't have the best controls ever, not even when it comes to platforming in 3D, but it delivers. It definitely stands out as an action RPG of the PS1 era. This game was developed and published by Namco, and you know how they are when it comes to re-releases. If it's not gonna be very profitable, they just won't do it. And that's why maybe this game is still a PS1 exclusive. Number 3. Thousand Arms. This is a collaboration between Atlus and Red Entertainment, back then known as Red Company, the same people who did most of the Sakura Wars games and collaborated with Idea Factory and Compile Heart for the Agarest series. So the dating influences from those games is also present here, with your main character choosing a girlfriend. Outside of that, it's a steampunk turn-based RPG that's quite original like most RPGs here. Battles are played in 2D with 3 characters at your command, side by side, except you can only fight with one, and the other 2 will act as support. For instance, they can heal you or buff you. It's a pretty cool battle system, I like it a lot, but it can drag on depending on the enemies. Everything else is traditional style with shrunk characters navigating through the map. Overall, this is a great hidden gem, but it's Atlus, and they're also not known for re-releasing their obscure titles anywhere. Number 2. Legend of Gaia. At last we arrive at the most controversial title in the list. Controversial because this game was a commercial success when it came out. In all territories it was released. Japan, Europe and North America. It was developed by two studios called Procyon and Contrail, but published by Sony themselves. Sony do tend to re-release their games if they were successful on other consoles, so I have no clue why Legend of Gaia has never been one of them, and now it's pretty much a forgotten gem. You will control 3 playable warriors, each with their own prologue. Once they meet, the goal will be to revive the Genesis trees in order to stop a dangerous mist that's ruining civilization. Battle system is turn-based and it's all about crafting different arts with the D-pad by creating different combos. Pretty unique system for its time. Great game here, a classic, probably still waiting to return to glory once again. Number 1. Kartia, the Word of Fate. Some JRPGs in this list were released on the PSN, but only in Japan. Nobody else in the world got them, so English versions still retain their exclusivity on the PS1. Kartia is one of them. Now, this is a personal favorite of mine in the tactical RPG field, but it's an Atlus game. I already said Atlus rarely re-releases their games in the West. Anyway, in Kartia you can choose between two main characters, one of them being Lacrima Christi, a favorite video game heroine of mine. You already noticed the art style reminds you of Final Fantasy, that's because the artist is Yoshitaka Amano. Even so, the game never really succeeded, especially since Atlus wasn't a big publisher yet back in the day. It's a grid-based strategy RPG, pretty simple but with a twist. With the exception of regular attacks, everything else is used by cards like spells, buffs or debuffs. You can also summon monsters to aid you in battle, as you only get a handful of characters per map. This is a great game with excellent story and awesome character development. I have a few honorable mentions. The first one is Saga Frontier 2. I didn't include this game because the first one was remastered last year, so it makes me believe that maybe sometime in the near future this one will be remastered as well. The second one is Tales of Destiny. The original is almost an exclusive on the PS1 because it isn't anywhere on the PS Store or the PSN. It was released on the PS2 only in Japan as the director's cut version. It's fan translated, I believe. And finally, my beloved Vandal Hearts. This was also released on the Sega Saturn and Windows. Both versions remained in Japan. So these last two games are not 100% exclusive to the PlayStation. Anyway, that's all for today, people. Those were my picks for today's video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!